Okay, so it's the Yahrzeit of Ruth bat Shmuel Rephael, and it's Margaret Kaplan's late sister Ruth. And I wish, obviously, Margaret and her family and her siblings long life, and my condolences go out to them upon the loss of their sister. And just please God, may the shir, both the Gemara shir and the halakha part that Kevin gives, be an aliyah for her neshama.
Amen.
Amen.
Gav, your clients, are they expecting you at 6 o'clock sharp?
6 o'clock sharp.
All right, good. I don't know if Arthur's going to see the screen or not, but we went through the summary yesterday. I don't know if I can just go straight into the shir.
Yeah, I think so. That's the only way we can make up the time.
All right. So remember, we read the clause of the Mishnah: if one stole an animal from his father and slaughtered or sold it, and his father died afterwards, he pays the fourfold or fivefold. Now, the Gemara inquires, Rava inquired of Rav Nachman, if one stole an ox of two partners and slaughtered it, and then admitted his liability to one of them, what is the law? So what are we talking about here? Is that we're talking about a thief that stole from two business partners that shared an ox, or two respective farmers that and what happened is that the thief was quite fond of the one shareholder of the ox, and he said to him, look, I feel bad, I've sold the ox, I needed the money for drugs, so what happens is I've got half your money for the ox and I'm going to give you, which I owe you, but if I admit it to you and give it to you, I don't have to pay a penalty, I just have to pay the compensatory amount. And we're saying that the half share partner of the ox, the first partner, says to the thief, well, what I tell my second partner of his 50% share? The thief said, get him to speak to me. So the second shareholder says to him, where's my money? He said, I don't know what you're talking about, I never stole your ox. So he says, I'm going to sue you. In the meantime, the guy was so drugged out, he didn't realize there were witnesses to the event. So when it goes to court, then obviously there's a penalty if you steal an animal, sell or slaughter it. At that point, you're eligible for an ox at a fivefold payment and a fourfold payment for the sheep. So in that particular case, what we're trying to find out is, are you allowed to do half payments? Because again, when witnesses come forward and attest that the thief stole from the first partner, the thief said yes, and I paid him back the principal, and because I did it before troubling the court, I don't owe a penalty on him. So what they want to find out is, for the second partner, is there a liability for the fivefold payment for his respective 50% share? So what is this analogous to a son stealing from the father? Is that if the father died...
Ciao, Suzanne.
Okay, let me go back and mute you. So if I've done it, don't worry, but if basically a son stole from a father, again a drug addict, because most children don't steal from their fathers, and then sold the ox after he stole it, he would be eligible while his father's alive for the fivefold payment, because he owes his father the money. But if the father already died, he has a shareholding in it, just like two business partners. And Shimon, the brother that stole, has a 50% share in that ox, and his brother Rephael has a 50% share in his ox. So what we want to know is, can his brother sue him for his half? And the answer is obviously yes. But what's with regards to the 5 times the penalty? Is he allowed to get 5 times the penalty for his 50% share? And that's where there's the analogy between the business partners and the sons that are also like partners, in that they inherit their father's estate. Is there an eligibility for a 5 half payments? We're asking this both of the two partners that own the ox, as well as two brothers that inherit the ox. And the one is owed a 50% share of the animal. So we don't know if half payments are allowed. So how does this whole argument come? Is that Rav inquired of Rav Nachman, when you look at the pasuk, do you say, and that pasuk, by the way, is in Shmot, Exodus chapter 21, verse 37, do you say that the merciful one states in his Torah that the thief shall pay 5 cattle in place of an ox? Because that's exactly what the pasuk says. Or perhaps it implies the concept and not literal, how that he pays 5 half cattle in place of half an ox. So what we want to know is, does it allow for half payments, or does it mean that you have to read the pasuk literally? So Kevin, what we saying yesterday is that if you read the pasuk literally, you say that you pay 5 oxen in place of an ox if you steal it and sell it, or you steal it and slaughter it, but not 5 half oxen in the place of half oxen. So if you want to hold the pasuk literally, that it has to be 5 oxen in the place of an entire ox, it would cancel out eligibility if you paid the one business partner that you liked out for his 50% share, and you're not a partner here. There's 2 people that own the ox. You like the one guy, you paid him back the principal. So the other guy that sues you and has witnesses, are you just eligible to pay him the 2-fold payment? Or would you be eligible to pay him 5 times the value of that ox as per the pasuk? But then you'd have to interpret the pasuk as meaning conceptually. Whatever you stole percentage-wise from the partner you did not pay, between the 2 partners, you pay them that percentage times 5. So in this case, 2 business partners, you paid the one, the other one sues you in court, you pay him his 50% share times 5. So if the ox was worth 400 zuz, you basically gave the first partner his 200 zuz back, there's no penalty, and the second one sued you in court for witnesses, you would have to pay him 1,000 zuz, which is 200 zuz his share times 5, if we hold that a half portion of the ox is taken into account. So Rav is asking this of Rav Nachman. Now we learned yesterday that Rav Nachman doesn't believe in those half payments, because he says you have to read the pasuk not in terms of concept of paying 5 times what you stole, if you sold it or slaughtered it, but exactly 5 whole oxen in place of a full oxen. In other words, if you only damaged or sold part thereof, there's a problem. So Rav Nachman resolved the inquiry of saying, the merciful one stated in his Torah, 5 cattle to imply, but not 5 half cattle. Okay, so far, are all you guys getting it?
I'm fine.
All right. So, Kev, do you see the correlation between the 2 brothers and the business partners?
Yeah.
You see it now? Okay, good. All right. So what happens is Rav Nachman is not quite, basically, Rava is not quite happy with Rav Nachman's answer, because he challenged him from our particular Mishnah, which states if one stole an ox or sheep from his father and slaughtered or sold it, and his father dies afterwards, he pays the 4-fold or 5-fold payment to his brothers, who Rava implies jointly inherit the animal with him. So he's saying the very fact that our Mishnah says he pays the 4-fold or 5-fold payment means that if the father died afterwards, and you've got just, let's not call a whole lot of brothers. Let's just keep it a case of Shimon and Reuven. Shimon and Reuven inherit the ox after the father dies. Now Shimon is in fact a shareholder. So if he stiffs his brother for 50% of his share, what Rava is saying is he's entitled to pay his brother not only the 50% back on the amount that he stole, but 5 times that according to the pasuk in concept. And Rav Nachman said, no, it doesn't work like that. It has to be, we only pay in full according to an entire ox that was stolen and not part thereof. So Rava brings this as a challenge to Rav Nachman from our particular Mishnah. And he's saying, now here in this case, since the father died and he inherits a share of the animal, it's similar to where he stole the ox of 2 partners and went ahead and admitted to one of them. because here too he does not make a payment of 4 whole sheep or 5 whole cattle, since he pays the fourfold or fivefold payment to his brothers only for their share of the animal, not for his own share. So, but the Mishnah states that he pays the fourfold or fivefold payment, which means evidently one is liable to the fourfold or fivefold payment, even when he will not pay 4 whole sheep or 5 whole oxen for the whole animal, but only 4 or 5 half animals, or whatever the percentage is for the brother's share. And what that means is he does not pay the portion he's exempt from and remains liable to pay the penalty for the rest. So Rav Nachman answers this question of Rava, and he said, look, that's not what the Mishnah is talking about. We're dealing with the case where the father is still alive and sues him in court, meaning the son was found guilty in court and he became liable to make a payment of 5 whole oxen. Why? Because he wasn't a partner. His father hadn't died yet. He hadn't inherited anything. So he stole 1 ox from his father. He has to pay back 5. He stole the entire ox from his father. Therefore, it fulfills the pasuk according to Rav Nachman, and the father's entitled to 5 whole oxen. And that liability remains intact even when he subsequently inherits this obligation. Meaning, according to one opinion, if the father then dies afterwards, he still has to make restitution to the estate. And whatever he was meant to inherit, he will inherit deducted from the amount that he stole, obviously. So he's not going to be stiffed out of anything. But the brothers wouldn't be able to sue him after the fact, as we learned, because there's no penalty fine for inheritors. Meaning it has to be while the father's alive that legal document is sorted out, that the son has to pay the estate. But when the father dies, as we learned yesterday, it's difficult for the brothers to sue him at that point. But we're still going to get to that stage. So Rava challenges Rav Nachman, and he says, okay, I hear that. I agree with you while the father's alive. He's entitled to 5 full oxen for the entire ox that his son stole from him, because his son wasn't an inheritor at that point. But if the father didn't sue the son, what do you contend the law to be? That indeed the court cannot impose a fine of 4 or 5 halves of cattle, and thus he does not pay for 4 halves for a sheep or 5 halves for a cattle, and he does not pay the fourfold or fivefold payment. So what he's saying is, Rava is saying, well then what's your alternative? Is that basically, does it mean that if the father doesn't sue the son in court, invariably there's no 4 or fivefold payment? Because the brothers can't sue him for their inherited share of the portion. So he's saying there's a bit of a difficulty. If so, rather than teach as a contrasting case in the latter part of the Mishnah in 74, we're not at the 74th daf yet, but you'll see the contrasting case. And it's as follows: if one stole an ox or sheep from his father, and the father died, and the son slaughtered or sold the animal afterwards, he does not pay the 4 or fivefold payment. Okay? Since the animal he slaughtered or sold, guys, remember, was then partly his own. So the minute that's the case, then he's entitled to his share. He just owes the brothers for their share. And according to Rav Nachman, Rav is saying is that there's no partial 4 or fivefold payment if you take the pasuk literally. So he's saying, let the Tana draw us the distinction in that very case itself, where the thief slaughtered the animal while his father was still alive, and maybe stated as follows. In other words, when are these things said? So when do we say that the son is liable to the fourfold or fivefold payment when he slaughtered or sold the stolen animal before the father died? Only when the father sues him in court and is alive and well. And then the court can impose upon him a fine for 4 whole sheep or 5 whole cattle. But if the father didn't sue him in court, he doesn't pay the fourfold or fivefold payment because A, there was no legal case with the father, and in any event, the sons can't sue him afterwards for part payment thereof. So Rav Nachman deflects a challenge. He says to Rava, indeed, the Mishnah could also have stated it so. However, since in the first segment of the Mishnah, the Tana seizes upon the case if one stole from his father and slaughtered or sold it, and his father dies afterwards. In the latter segment of the Mishnah, too, it goes with the same symmetry. If one stole from his father and the father died and the son slaughtered or sold it afterwards. Anyway, they left it, and then Rav Nachman, apparently in the Gemara, retracts his statement. It says, in the morning, Rav Nachman said to Rava, the merciful one stated in his Torah, the thief shall pay 5 cattle in place of the ox, and this includes even paying 5 halves of cattle in place of half an ox. In other words, what we're saying is here, where the thief admitted his liability to only one of the partners. As we said, the thief, if we take the case of business partners, the thief is not in business with these 2 guys that own the ox together, but he likes the one guy. So he admitted to the one guy and gave him his money back and said, listen, I needed money for drugs, you sorted. But the partner doesn't get paid because he denies it, and the partner sues him in court with witnesses. He can get his 50% of the share times by 5 for stealing and selling the second partner's share of the ox. So Rav Nachman had a change of heart, and it said, because I had not eaten the meat of an ox. That was Rav Nachman's explanation. So what did he mean, I've not eaten the meat of the ox? If you say in English today, I want to get to the meat of the issue, I want to get to the heart of the matter, it means that you want to actually examine it in all its facets. So it's a term that Rav Nachman uses, and the Gemara uses actually in Eruvin in the 21st daf and Bava Basra in the 22nd daf, about, it's a Talmudic allegory for the proper understanding of Torah law, to get to the meat of it. So that was one opinion. The other opinion is that he did not eat of the meat of the ox, meaning he actually fasted the day before, and he was a bit hypoglycemic, and he failed to fully comprehend the issue properly. So in any event, Rav Nachman does an about turn, and then the Gemara asks, but then what is the difference between the first segment, listen carefully, where the son slaughtered the animal during the father's lifetime, and the second segment, where the son slaughtered the animal after the father's death? If indeed the court can impose a penalty of 5 halves of cattle, then the son should be liable in the second case as well. So what is it actually saying is, previously when Rav Nachman held that the court cannot impose a penalty of 5 halves of cattle, whether it's a share to his brother or to the business partner of the 2 oxen that he didn't pay off, the difference between the Mishnah's first and second segments was obviously quite understandable. In the first segment, which Rav Nachman explained is referring specifically, let's take the case of the father. The father's alive and well. He sues his son. The son took an entire ox. There's a 5-fold ox that's paid in the place of that ox. That's clear. And only the second case is a bit different, because what happens then is the brothers, when the father dies, are partner. He's got a brother, Shimon's got a partner, Rephael, and then do we say that in that case it's a little bit different? Okay, so basically the court imposed a full 5-fold penalty, and it's only later that the son himself inherits a portion. That's clear. In that case, the Mishnah ruled that he's liable to pay the remainder to his brothers. But the second segment is different, because the father already died before the slaughter or sale. So the main point being that he died before suing his son in court. So the Mishnah exempts the son from the 4-fold or 5-fold payment, because according to Rav Nachman, before he had a change of mind, is that it couldn't impose a partial penalty. But now that Rav Nachman explains the son's liability in the first segment as applying even where the father had not sued him in court. In other words, father didn't sue him, but the brother wasn't forgiving of his share, and the brother decides to sue him. Then, according to this first segment, the brother can get his share times 5. But we want to know the case, what happens when the father dies? So the problem is it's going to get a little bit more complicated. We've got 10 minutes. We need to go through this. Is that the Gemara answers, Rav Nachman said to him, to Rava in the first segment where the son slaughtered the animal while the father was alive, we can apply to him the verse, and he slaughters it. Whenever the Gemara uses the word it means in the animal's entirety. But he slaughtered it entirely in lawlessness. What do we mean by lawlessness? The son hadn't inherited it yet. In other words, he didn't even have a shareholding or an inheritance, so it wasn't partly his. That's completely illegal. It's one thing if he didn't give his share to his brother and he was part owner. That's a different case. But in that first case, what he did was completely in lawlessness, and therefore if his brother sues him, he's entitled to give his brother his share times 5. But in the second segment, where the son slaughtered the animal after he inherited a portion of it upon his father's death, we can't apply to him the verse, and he slaughters it. Why? Because he never slaughtered the whole animal. He's entitled to a share of it, which implies that he slaughters it not in lawlessness. So what that means is that since the animal, he owned part of it, at the time of the slaughter, he can't be said to have done it in lawlessness, which means he doesn't give his brother a 5-fold penalty because he was a shareholder. All he has to do is give his brother the principal back. And you're saying as far as giving the brother a 2-fold penalty back, because it says if he stole, he pays double. That's not with regards to a brother, because there's a well-known principle that says that one cannot bequeath a fine to his sons, which means that the one brother can't impose a fine on his brother for an inherited amount. He can only get paid back his share. But if there's a drug addict that stole from 2 people that own the ox, it's a different case. Why? Because he paid one of the partners back his share that he likes. The other one he told that he didn't steal his item. The second partner of that ox sued him with witnesses, and in that case, he pays a 5-fold penalty for the second partner's share of 50%, because there's no rule in terms of that you can't sue for a penalty in that case. It's only when 2 brothers inherit it from the father and the one brother takes the whole share, he's got to make right with his brother the other share. But he's part of an inheritor there. It's only when he steals it while the father's still alive that he pays full oxen. Whereas Rava is a little bit different. The Rava holds different to Rav Nachman, and Rava holds that even in the second case, as far as I know, that the brother might be able to sue for a penalty. We don't know. It wasn't specific, but we know that it was a suggestion of Rava. But because Rava sought Rav Nachman's advice, he probably listened to it in that case as well. Now we've got 7 minutes just to share the screen and summary of what I did yesterday. And that's going to help you guys quite a bit. And I know, Gavin, you've got a meeting. I'm going to be as quickly as possible. I can't go. I'm going to go as fast as I can, my friend. I know you're under pressure. I want you to be late. Just give me 1 sec. Okay, I'm going to share the screen. Okay, so. All right. So, right. So, Rav, let's start. If you go to the beginning of that part of the daf, Rav Nachman sees the pasuk as literal, meaning you have 4 or 5 whole sheep or oxen to be paid back respectively. So, let's take a very simple case. If you steal a sheep, you pay back 4 times of the. You pay back 4 sheep for a sheep that you stole, or the cash equivalent. If you steal an ox, you pay 5 oxen in the place of an ox, or the cash equivalent. So Rava doesn't read the pasuk literally. He talks about the concept of extraction, about percentage. So in other words, if you owe your brother X amount, or you owe a business partner X amount, and they're only a shareholder in it, then you pay them the fivefold penalty of their share. Does that make sense? In other words, Rava does see an argument with half payments. So he said brothers are like partners, and the same as two shareholders in an ox, as we said. So Rav is suggesting and agreeing with Rav Nachman that there's not an issue if the father is still alive, because the father had the son take an ox from him in its entirety, and the father's entitled to get back 5 oxen. But Rav is further suggesting that once the father died, the brothers can sue the thief brother for their share percentage of the ox, and you can times their percentage by a payment of 5. So he sees it as fractional payments, whereas Rav Nachman initially saw it as there's either full payments or no payments at all, as far as the fivefold or fourfold payment was concerned. So at this stage, Rav Nachman says you can only sue for whole theft, and that's the whole penalty, not shareholding percentage. There's no 5 times the payment to brothers, only the actual share. Okay, then we said that Rav Nachman had a good night's sleep, a good meal, reassessed the situation, and agrees in concept of payment or percentage. So Rav Nachman states if the son stole and then slaughtered or sold the ox during the father's lifetime, he pays the entire fivefold payment. As he stole the entire ox, he's not an inheritor at that point, and that's why it's known as lawlessness. And it's a different case, because Rava wants to know that once the father dies, do the brothers still get the 5 times the amount for their respective share? And Rav Nachman says no, because the one son did inherit it, so it wasn't in lawlessness. And there's a concept that brothers can't sue for penalties. So all that happens then is that he has to give the brothers their respective share, but there's no penalty of 5. Does that make sense? And Rava has to agree. All right, guys, we're done. I know Gavin has to go in 4 minutes. I hope this was a quick summary.
Very good. Kevin, are you okay?
Damon, can you go? I'm just very tired. I've absorbed some.
That's fine. Gavin has to go at this point. So, Gavin, you go. I've got 10 minutes.
Can you go over your last point
let me
again?
go. You guys can carry on. Guys, thank you so much, eh?
Thanks.
Much appreciated.
Thanks. No, thanks for also. I prefer it when it's earlier. I think it's better for all of us. Okay.
So tell me what your question is. With pleasure, I'll help you.
So you said, I don't know. There's Rava and there's Rav Nachman. Okay.
All right. Let's just look at the summary notes rather than the whole thing. Okay.
So you want to? Yeah. Let's just go over it one more time, please. Yeah. So just.
Okay. No problem.
I didn't sleep so much last night, and I was on the go today. Okay.
No problem. So this is how it starts off. There it says, what happens if a son stole an ox from his father? Does he have to pay the 5-fold penalty for stealing an ox? And the bottom line is Rav Nachman says, well, the father's alive, obviously, because he's got no share in the animal as the son. He hasn't inherited it yet. So there's no problem with that. If he steals an ox, he pays back 5 oxen for the ox that he stole. Because Rav Nachman sees the pasuk literally, that you have to steal the whole animal in order to be eligible to pay back 5 times the amount for stealing the ox. But Rava isn't totally happy with that, because he says he agrees with Rav Nachman while the father's alive, but he's saying what happens if the father passes away? And there's 2 brothers, there's Shimon and Reuven. Let's rather do it like that. And Shimon steals the ox worth 400 zuz. He owes his brother 200 zuz. Can it be that since his brother is a shareholder and he only owes his brother 200 zuz, his brother can sue him for the penalty of 5-fold because he sold the animal after he stole it? But 5-fold on his share, which would be 1,000 zuz. So Rav Nachman says no. because Rav Nachman reads the pasuk literally and said, if you steal an entire animal, you pay back 5 animals for the 1 animal, but we don't work in half portions, percentages, fractions. And Rava is saying, why not? Because our Mishnah is like the one where there's a thief and 2 owners of an ox, and the thief drug addict likes the one partner, pays him back the principal, and the second partner comes back to him and says, well, what about my share? He said, I haven't stolen your ox. He was drugged out of his mind. So the second partner of the ox sues this thief, and the thief in court doesn't realize they're witnesses, but he's paid the principal back to the first owner of the ox, so he doesn't have to pay a penalty. But Rava is saying, why doesn't he pay the second partner 5 times his 50% share? And it's the same like this pasuk with Shimon and Reuven, 2 brothers. Again, he stuffed his brother out of his 50%. Why doesn't he pay 5 times the penalty on that 50% that he owes his brother? In other words, Rava is looking at it as a concept of you pay 5 times what you stole. Whereas Rav Nachman is saying, only if you steal an ox do you give back 5 oxen, but we don't work on percentages. Does that make sense, Kev, so far?
Yeah, the percentage story doesn't. That's where it.
Well, that actually makes more sense than reading a pasuk literally and saying there's 5 whole sheep, because what Rav is actually saying is that why wouldn't you just pay on percentages?
Couldn't it be? So instead of if that's the 5 alternative of the 5 whole sheep, they can give a monetary amount instead of the actual physical sheep.
Correct.
I mean the oxen.
Correct, but it still has to be that if you steal something and you sell it or slaughter it, there's a penalty in that you're paying 5 times what you stole. So in other words, whatever partner you paid off, if you like the first guy, owner of the ox, and you paid him his share, you still owe the second one where you denied liability. It's like when the brother inherits the animal from his father and the father died, he's a shareholder. So he only owes his brother 50% of the animal. And Rava is saying, well, why doesn't he give his brother his share, times it by 5? Because that would still fulfill the pasuk in concept. Why does it have to be literal, all or nothing? That's what he's saying.
Yeah, because it can't be full.
It can't be whole. Exactly.
Because it's a half share. It's not. He didn't. The brother didn't own didn't inherit the full ox.
Correct.
It was shared between him and his sibling.
So Rav Nachman started off saying, no, you can't do that. Then Rav Nachman thought about it and he said, you can. He basically said that when the father's alive, both Rav and Rav Nachman agree that the father gets 5 oxen replaced for his ox that he stole if he sues his son. Because that was in lawlessness, that was complete theft. He doesn't have a share in it. But Rav Nachman doesn't agree with Rava, and Rava has to adhere to Rav Nachman because he asked him the question. And he said, look, it's different. If the son stole it after he inherited it, he still is a part shareholder. So he only pays his brother his share of the animal, but there's not a 5-fold penalty because we learn that there are no penalties for inheritors. So his brother can't sue him for the penalty. However, if you're taking a case, and we've got 3 minutes left, Kev, is if you take a case of, say I steal from you and Gavin, and you're both business partners in an ox. I'm not a partner in the ox. I'm a thief. I'm a drug addict thief. And I take the ox, I steal the ox, and I feel bad for you, Kevin. And I come up to you and I say to you, here's your ox is worth 400 zuz. Here's your 200 zuz. And you say, well, what about my business partner? You can say, well, get him to call me. The business partner calls me in the ox. And I say to him, I never stole the ox. Guy's upset. He sues me with witnesses. I was drugged out. I didn't know they're witnesses. And basically, in that case, even Rav Nachman would say that you pay that second partner his share of the ox that you stole, times it by 5, because he's not a brother. There's no rule of that. There's not a penalty for heirs. You pay him 5 times. So if you owed him 200 zuz and you didn't make good on it, the second partner, then in that case, obviously, you pay the second partner after he sues you 5 times what his share is. So Rav Nachman would agree in that case with business partners. It's a different case to inheritors. Does that make sense?
Business partners. Okay, let's.
Okay, get rid of the word business partners. Use the term 2 partners in an ox.
Okay, let's just do that last point. The comparison. Okay, partners so, in an ox.
Yeah, you and John own an ox. You and John own an ox. I want money for drugs. I steal the ox. I then sell it, and I've got 400 zuz for the ox. I feel bad. I go to you. I say to Kevin, here's your 200 zuz. I've made good. You say to me, what about my partner, John? I said, I don't like the guy. Get him to call me. John calls me. I said to John, I don't know what you're talking about. I never stole the ox. Yeah. I'm drugged out. I'm not there. John sues me with 2 witnesses. I don't even know the witnesses are there. I lose. Even Rav Nachman says, as well as Rava, that for that second shareholder in the ox that you have, I must pay John his share times 5.
5,000.
For brothers, which is 1,000, but for brothers, no, they can't sue you for the 5-fold penalty because there are no penalties for inheritors. Brothers.
So what does the brother get? The brother.
He just gets his share. Whatever shares he does get, he gets his share, but no penalty on that. Just the principle.
Just like the compensation. That's it. Just the
what you owe him. What you owe him, you pay. You pay what you owe.
He'd get 200. If it's a sold for 400, he'd get 200.
Correct.
That's it.
There's no penalty with brothers. That's all. That's all.
Is it because of, does it go back to the thing? Sorry to interrupt you. Like you can't charge your brother interest. Is that what it does?
Exactly. Well, it's
okay. Thank you. Okay.
Okay.
Shkach, thanks, man. Even though I'm very tired, I don't think I dozed off. I may have for a few seconds. I tried my utmost. I don't think I did.
No problem. You